Hey everyone, welcome to Web3 Deep Dive. I'm your host, Rachel Wolfson. This show focuses on real-world Web3 use cases to help you better understand how this technology is being applied today and how it may be applied in the future. If this sounds interesting, please be sure to subscribe to the show so you stay up to date with all of the new episodes. Before getting started with today's episode, I'd like to thank Worsta for making Web3 Deep Dive possible. Worsta is a global technology consultancy with headquarters in Austin, Texas, and Quito, Ecuador. Worsta works with enterprises to help them make sound business decisions on all of their core technologies. And before we get started with the show, I also just want to remind you guys that Web3 Deep Dive is for educational and entertainment purposes only and does not offer any forms of financial advice at all. Without further ado, let's dig deep into Web3. In this episode, I'll be speaking with Casey Craig, Global Head of Communications at CoinDesk, and Sam Ewen, who's the head of CoinDesk Studios. We'll be talking about NFT tickets, Web3 use cases, and how all of this is going to become mainstream moving forward. Let's get started with today's episode. Hey, Sam. Hey, Casey. How's it going?
Good. How are you, Rachel? Thanks for having us.
Thanks.
Great to be here.
Yeah. Well, I'm doing well, and I'm so happy that both of you can join me today on Web3 Deep Dive. I feel like you guys are the guests of honor because you are like hosting Consensus here in Austin.
Yeah, it's going to be an amazing time.
Yeah, it is. This is our 9th year doing Consensus and CoinDesk's 10th anniversary, actually, too. So it's a big year for us.
Wow. Congrats.
Yeah, thank you.
So how do you guys feel so far? Like Consensus is about to start. What are your thoughts on the atmosphere here in Austin for this Consensus?
I mean, obviously things in the industry are a little bit different than last year, but the numbers are still strong. We have over 12,000 people, I think, confirmed coming this year. 440 press registered. We have over 400 speakers, over 300 sponsors. So all in all, the interest to come to Consensus is still really strong. And I think that's just the base. You know, a lot of like CoinDesk Consensus attendees, readers are really loyal. Like our community is, you know, we've been around for 10 years. That's a decade-long community. And I think that's why they're here this year, is because last year there was a lot of new exciting things to cover. Same with this year, but what better place to come to figure out the uncertainty in the market and the industry as a whole than to come to Consensus.
Right. Sam, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I would also say that there's so much more that is done when you're not in like the froth of speculation. And last year, Consensus, it was actually at Consensus, I think it was on our third day when the news about Three Arrows Capital came out. And Voyager was right around then too. So like it went from like bull to bear really quickly. We kind of like that in the sense that, yeah, the people who are here this year are people who are truly building, who are truly investing, who are like bringing forth the future. And we sort of don't have all the people who are looking to like just get alpha on like, how do I make some edge and make some money?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's important because those events are a huge turnoff for me. The ones where it's like, how can we get rich quick? Mm-hmm. I feel like Consensus is more, you know, about businesses using blockchain as a technology, using Web3 as a technology. How can we revolutionize business models using technology? And that's what I love about Consensus. And I remember Consensus used to be in New York. I think that was the first Consensus that I went to was
Times Square.
2018?
No, the first Consensus I think was 2016.
Okay.
Yeah, it was 2015 or 16.
Okay.
Yeah. And we only had 500 people at the first Consensus. Last year we had 20,000 in person. This year 12,000. You know, so we've come a long way.
Yeah, it goes to show like how much this space has grown even through the ups and downs, like blockchain, crypto, Web3, it's all here and it's all just continuing to mature.
Yep.
Also, what's interesting, we were talking about this last night, is not to get like too crypto meta, but even our attendance sort of follows a similar trajectory to like the way the Bitcoin chart does, in the sense that even when we're in our lows, the lows are then higher than the lows before. So in 2019, when we had a bear market, we had about 4,200 people. Here, we're in somewhat of a bear market. We're close to 12,000, 13,000. So the mean keeps rising as more and more people come into the industry and like legitimize it, which I think is like a nice way to think about it. And then of course we'll have a bull and 30,000 people will come in years to come. So it's going to be interesting to see how it evolves.
Right, exactly. So the name of this podcast is Web3 Deep Dive, as you both know. So before we get into NFT tickets and into like what we're actually going to be speaking about, I want to know your definitions of Web3. So Casey, if you were to define Web3, how would you define that?
I mean, I think, first of all, I think Web3 is defined differently across like different industries. I mean, I think last year, like back on, Sam's point about the froth, people used Web3 as like a pure marketing jargon. Like anything that was encompassed under Web3 was considered innovative, and they were like tacking it on to things in like the metaverse. But I honestly think Web3 is just like anything beyond the step of like Web2 and what we're dealing with now. AR, VR, it's just more immersive, and it's just the next step that I think everybody will, whether they even know it or not, are just going to be involved in and using on a day-to-day basis.
Sam?
For me, the way I kind of look at it is that Web3 is really a like technological infrastructure layer. And I focus on the fact that we are writing in code that allows people to verify ownership, and ownership is just a giant unlock. And the ownership doesn't have to be in an NFT that made you a lot of money. It can be loyalty and membership. It can be ticketing, as we're talking about today. It's the idea of kind of a connective tissue that brings people together, but that is also readable and doesn't require that you give all of your data away with it. And so I think that's really the point that makes the most sense for me when you think of Web3, because I think a lot of people sort of have very narrow, and then some people have very wide sort of definitions of what Web3 is. But really, I think it's about that ownership as an unlock. And once you can prove ownership in some way or another, and that could be into a fandom, or it can be to a DAO, or it can be to an NFT collection, or it can be to a token, you just have the opportunity of being a participant versus just a sort of a bystander.
Right.
And Consensus, I mean, Sam has really spearheaded a lot of the Web3 programming, selecting speakers, the agenda, to bring, Consensus is, we've always been at the forefront of crypto and blockchain, but this year too, we really have like expanded into Web3 and like beyond just crypto. And a lot of that is a huge thanks to Sam, really bringing us to that next level.
Right. And Sam, that's what I wanted to ask you about, because this year, you guys are doing NFT ticketing. Am I correct? Can you elaborate on that?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's a little. I mean, a lot of folks have done NFT tickets, so we're definitely not the first to do it. What we looked at was how do we sort of look at the idea of what additive value is versus extractive value, right? Extractive value is the equivalent of Live Nation saying, oh, because everyone wants to be, go to a Taylor Swift concert, we can charge as much as we want, and the most loyal people will charge them even more for like a VIP pass. For us, we're like, what could we do where our most loyal fans can buy into a multi-year ticket, saying they're going to be coming to Consensus for multiple years, and in fact they get a discount for doing so. And then by being holders, how do we reward them extra because they are so loyal? So we built a ton of mechanics into our ticketing this year, which really will extend out through 2025, so that those holders get actually the most premier experience. But actually, if you do the math, they got it for cheaper than if you just bought a ticket every year.
Okay. So is that called the NFT pass?
Well, we call it the Consensus NFT ticket or pass. We actually worked with an art blocks artist named Fahad Kareem. We built the technology on art blocks as well, because we wanted to sort of make sure we were playing with the medium. And so the collection is actually called Microcosms, and it's called Microcosms because each person has the individual microcosm of their own worldview. And at Consensus, they all come together. So we made it plural. So it's really a collection of each person's microcosm. So if you go on OpenSea and search microcosm, you'll see our ticket. The holders of those tickets are then the ones that get the rewards. So we didn't sort of call it the NFT pass. We sort of said buy an NFT, and by holding it, you get all of these things, because we also wanted our audience, for a lot of our audience, for example, this is the first NFT they held. And because for them, they knew from the get that they were getting more value than they were putting in financially. So we really wanted to sort of not almost diminish it by saying, oh, it's just an NFT ticket, because it's really a lot more than that. It's really a sort of entrance into a club.
Yeah. And something different about Consensus attendees versus some of the other crypto conferences, that our attendees, like a lot of them are from traditional finance. I mean, they are not your typical user for an NFT. So that's why this NFT ticket, the loyalty program is so important, because as Sam said, this is probably their first NFT, and they can really understand, the utility behind it, but it's really good for them. And so it's good for our attendees.
Yeah. Well, I like that it's, Sam, you mentioned this is probably their first NFT, which is great because that's a way to drive adoption and to bring the mainstream into the Web3 ecosystem. So just with that being said, how do people buy the NFTs? Do they have to use cryptocurrency? Can they use fiat, which is US dollars or other currencies? How did people obtain these NFTs? Were there a set amount of these NFTs? Like, I want to know all about it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, to get into the specifics of it, what we designed out was a 1,000 pass model with the expectation we were not going to sell 1,000 passes this year. So the way we sort of launched it was we brought it to the world. We sold a couple of hundred of them. We then kind of paused the project because now next year we're going to come out, and then those people will then get 3 years starting from next year. So the idea is each time you buy it, because it's all on chain, we have all the data. So we know when you bought it, we know sort of what year you got in, and therefore we can create for you a 3-year ARCed experience, which doesn't mean that after 3 years we won't sort of help that community out and be more involved with them. But the idea is that we would open it up sort of as we get to consensus each year until we sell out. Once we do sell out, then we have our kind of 1,000 most loyal consensus attendees. And those people will just continue to generate more and more rewards. If I can spend a minute on rewards, I mean, one of the things that I think was really interesting about how we did this was we looked and said, what will bring most value to the people who are coming to consensus? So for example, a lot of people come to consensus because they want to be seen as thought leaders, right? So we built into the holder group the idea that one person was going to win, in essence, a session on stage. They could talk about whatever they want.
Cool.
Right? So if someone, has something they want to talk about, they have a startup, they have something like that, now suddenly they get the opportunity to talk to a big crowd. What's really interesting, the guy who won it said, I don't have anything to talk to, but because it's an NFT, we said to them, great, you can use it, you can give it away, or you can sell it. So that person ended up selling it for 3 times the cost of the pass itself.
Wow.
So just the fact that they got that NFT means now they're living for free for the next 3 consensuses, because they still get to keep their primary asset, which is the microcosm. So the ticket, as all the rewards, are an airdrop that's on top of. So everyone who owns it got airdropped a pass to come this year. They'll get the same next year. But then we had 150 or so rewards that were dropped out. One of them happened to be a speaking session. One, for example, was a booth on the show floor.
Wow.
Retail, that's $19,000.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Right?
These are like good
Big
rewards.
reward.
But all of it, again, through our eyes was how do we let people show up better at consensus? So great. If someone can't afford a booth but can buy it on the open market or can win it, then therefore they get to come. We also did 3 conversations that people could win with Web3 VCs. So we worked with Mags, who runs Double Down, Andrew, who runs Fermion, and Derek, who runs Collab and Currency. Both were generous enough to give us an hour of their time. And basically the person who wins it gets to pitch them, brainstorm with them, hang out with them, and learn what they want. But it's hard to get a top VC to give you time. Yeah. But imagine now you have a startup and you're guaranteed an hour with them. That could transform their business. So that was the way we looked at this reward system. And again, we had a giant amount of rewards, but every reward was looked through. How do we make the consensus experience better and potentially more sort of create more opportunity for them to participate in Web3? And that was the way and everything, as mentioned earlier, was an additive piece to the pass itself. So you get the pass, you hold it, that gets you all the things. Now each year we re-roll all the rewards again. So we're going to go to our community after consensus this year. What did you like? What did you not like? What would you want more of? Then we can design next year's reward system based on that. And all of these will then become yet another set of additive rewards. So there is hypothetically the chance that someone spent 1.5 ETH on this pass that not only got them into consensus for the next 3 years, but either got them a job, got them funded. They sold something on the open market that means they made 5x on their investment. Who knows? We're going to find out what happens over the course of the life of it.
Yeah. No, that's great. Those rewards are amazing, by the way.
They're big.
I had no idea because, sometimes rewards are just like you sell it and you get the profits and that's it. But these are actual rewards that can, help a company grow, which is really exciting because Consensus is a huge networking event and it's a huge place for people to come together.
Yeah.
In terms of the benefits, because with NFTs, there are these benefits for the creators, for the buyers, for the people that have, helped make that happen. So for the creator benefits, how does that benefit CoinDesk? How does it benefit the artists? Let's talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So yeah, as we mentioned, we built on top of ArtBlock's engine, which is a great platform for those who are into the generative art space. We actually then worked with ArtBlocks, and we said we'd love an ArtBlocks artist to design the visual of this. So they helped with us. We sort of got down to a couple. We ended up with a guy named Fahad Kareem. He's got an amazing project that's part of the ArtBlocks curated project in season 7, I think it was. And what we liked about him is his work's very architectural and spatial. And so we thought, because we are something that takes place in a physical location, that we liked the idea that we could create work that sort of felt a little bit like a landscape, if you will. Because, Texas is landscape. We like the idea that there are portals and windows and things you can look through, and there are representations of kind of ways to look at the world around you. So we work with him. And we basically created a royalty structure, which is a percentage of the project goes to the artist, to ArtBlocks as our platform, and then we get the rest of it. We actually flipped the royalties with the artist on the secondary market, because at some point if someone loves the art and that starts to flip, we don't need to benefit as much from that. We get a small piece of that, but really the artist gets the most of that piece of it. So we designed kind of a royalty structure that on the primary comes mostly to us to subsidize the big event we put on. And then on secondary goes mostly to the artist. And, everyone seems to be pretty happy with it. We're obviously in a time where royalties themselves are a little under fire. So we were preferential to platforms that would support artist royalties as well. So even though you can go to OpenSea and grab one, and hopefully if you do, you're paying the royalties. We also work with a platform called Sansa, for example, which is very creator royalty forward. So we encourage people to go and look on the platforms that support artists.
Got it. Now, how many of these NFT tickets, did you say 100 of them were released this year?
150.
150. Were they all sold?
Yeah, so we sold 149 of them, I think. And I think we held one back for a contest or something.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good
and
to
so,
know.
yeah. And then the goal will be, like I said, over the next couple of years, we'll release and we'll open it up again and sell more next year. By that time, I think that people will have heard and seen that the rewards themselves are pretty valuable.
Right.
So I think just that word of mouth. But we always sort of felt like we were going to build slow. There are a lot of other folks who I think in the media space or wherever, where like their hope is to sell out because they want to fund what they're doing. For us, it's like Consensus kind of funds itself, right? So for us, it was like, how do we just make it substantive? We have an amazing community in a Telegram group. They all get to talk to each other. They get to meet each other. We have an event that we're doing with ArtBlocks at Consensus, where they all get to hang out and meet both Eric, who started ArtBlocks, as well as the artists themselves. So it was, again, more networking, connectivity, and just like having people sort of understand that this can be a rewarding technology, I think is key. One of the things we noticed just when we pulled some data was that, for example, like 92% of our collectors had never bought an ArtBlocks project. So ArtBlocks is, one of the second or third biggest platforms out there for NFTs. So it also brings new people into generative art, which we love. And it brings new people, like we're working with Passage Protocol, which is an amazing company focused on loyalty, brings new people into a loyalty system. So, part of our goal was, let's work with the best, let's try to design the best, and then slowly bring people into it and let them really experience what it's like to have kind of this additive value layer.
So what I love about what you just said, first of all, it's all very interesting. And it was a shame because I was invited to the ArtBlocks event in Marfa, Texas. I love Marfa. I don't know if you guys have ever been. If you haven't,
not
you
yet.
need to
I really
go.
want to go.
Yes, because there's
we'll go to ArtBlocks in October.
You have to go. The Prada installment.
Yes.
It's so cool. You just got to have to take a picture by that. But anyway, Sam, like you were saying, it's really interesting because right now I think we're at this point in time with NFTs where people are talking a lot about utility and NFT utility, and they're talking less about art. It used to be, at least this is my opinion, it used to be, I feel like when NFTs first came about, everybody was talking about the art, the JPEGs. That was the big thing. And now the big thing is utility. But what I love about what CoinDesk is doing with this NFT ticket is that it combines art in utility, which is super smart. You weren't just like, okay, we're going to have an NFT ticket and we really don't care about the artwork, but you actually chose ArtBlocks and a specific artist from that platform to design the ticket. I haven't seen the tickets. I'm very curious to see what they look like now. And but I just think it's super cool that you've combined art with utility.
Yeah, I think Check out the art. It's great. Everyone's unique. So, depending on what you pull. We also built in some special like secret traits. There's one palette, for example. There's 20 different color palettes. One of them, if you get it, then you get an infinite objects real version of your piece as well, but only if you mint that project, and you don't know until you actually click mint, if that happens. So we have a lot of fun with that. I think utility is what Web3 is about. I think that when you think of the art side of it, and look, there's 2 million artists right now on OpenSea trying to sell you things. Some of it's great, some of it's trash, and I think that's okay, right? That's the art market as well.
Yeah.
But with Web3 being really like the provenance layer of ownership, that's really the special sauce there. And I think that's why we see it's not about whether it's art or utility. It's about the and. But the and can be art. The and can be gaming. The and can be brand relationship. The and can be access, right? Like, so really whatever the and is I think the most important piece of it, except that you have this verifiable, transparent layer of ownership that connects you with the folks who release it, whether it's CoinDesk, whether it's Starbucks, right, or whether it's an artist. And I think all of that is really what makes it so powerful.
Mm-hmm, definitely. Well, that's another question I wanted to ask you both about was, because, I think this is a really important point for people, especially new people coming to the Web3 industry, to understand why does it have to be an NFT ticket? Why can't it just be a regular ticket and have like a CoinDesk loyalty reward system like credit cards do or airlines do? And so, Sam, you kind of touched on that, the importance of blockchain technology when it comes to NFTs, transparency, owning your data. I don't know if you want to elaborate on that, but that's a super important point here, I think.
Well, also really quick, just the basic UX of, like you mentioned, airline miles, credit card points, look at the Ticketmaster fiasco. These things are dysfunctional. Like, that's the biggest problem with Web 2 is a lot of these programs, like, you just can't even redeem the rewards. And I know that, with Web3 and a lot of like people will probably complain that some of the NFT, like the UX, the threshold isn't available for everybody. Like, it's harder to access or use. But that being said, I do think like the NFT loyalty programs, especially in tickets for conferences, they make a lot more sense. There's a lot more benefit to the user. Think of the rewards that Sam has come up with for these companies. They're getting a booth, they're getting a speaking slot. These aren't just like financial rewards or more points. This is something that could change their life, change their company. It's just so much more than just like, what's offered like in Web 2 right now.
Right.
I think, and I want to be clear, like, we're totally happy when people give us their credit card to buy a ticket. Like,
that still works for
we don't expect that the 12,000 people coming need this to be an NFT. The question is, do you want it to be, right? And that's what I think sometimes people get wrong, is it's like, disruption doesn't have to be about replacement. Disruption can be about, is there just a better way to do something? And you have to like tease that out and play it out for it to work. We have at Consensus this year, we have brands like LVMH, we have Shiseido, we have Pepsi, Anheuser-Busch, Salesforce, Amazon. We have the biggest companies in the world who are coming to talk, and all of them are working in this space and innovating, both back end, sort of in the SaaS layer and on the front end. And so I think for them, imagine if you could know more about your audience, but that audience is allowing you to sort of get access in through a cultural layer or through a membership layer or through an artistic layer, and feels good about the fact that you guys have this relationship versus feels taken advantage of. And so I think that's what we're trying to look at in general through this whole ecosystem, is how do you sort of rewrite the rules? Because Casey brought it up, right? Like, Ticketmaster is broken. Not only is
really
it
broken,
but it's broken.
Poor T Swift fans. I still feel bad for them.
But it's not even, T Swift is a part of it, right? But the reality is you're paying a 25% VIG or whatever just to use them because they now own all the pieces.
Yeah.
They also own the venues that people are going into, so they have control about where they can go and they can upcharge you there. Then you want to sell in the secondary market, you're then paying them yet another fee to do that. Like, it's really something that is, how do I take as much money from possible as from the people who have the most money, or the people who are most loyal, and often those people are the ones who don't have the most money, right? If you're a loyal Childish Gambino fan, it doesn't mean that you have millions of dollars. It just means I love this artist so much that I'm kind of willing to like work extra overtime to buy the ticket. Yeah. Now I'm paying a 20% to buy a resale ticket that's already marked up 4 times. Like, it just doesn't really seem to work that well. And I think that's where this becomes something where it's like, but like Bitcoin was always a peer-to-peer transaction, right? So if I have a ticket and you want to come, like even with this, we have a woman who bought one of our NFT tickets. She was already a speaker at Consensus, but she got airdropped 2 tickets because one of them was guaranteed and one of them she won as part of the airdrop we did. She just went on our Twitter and said, tell me what you're building and why Consensus would be most valuable to you, and I'll send you the tickets.
Yeah.
Right? So then she did. She transferred the NFTs over. Those people are now coming to Consensus. Like that saves them $2,000. Like that's a great opportunity that she was able to give because she just had the access and she has the audience to do so. So I think it is about the community and like how do we make this better? And and trying to do a slow education is not going to happen all at once.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it can't. I mean, this is that's something that people forget with like crypto, blockchain, Web3. I mean, it's still so nascent. Like none of this has evolved enough where all the kinks are ironed out. And I think that's something where crypto people, I've noticed that last year at Consensus, it was mayhem in a great way. I mean, people were very excited. It was the first time that crypto was truly injected into the mainstream. Everybody knew about it, especially with the big NFT boom. But the downside of it is that people were overeager, they were overzealous, thus a big part of the market crash. FTX, sorry, Sam.
Different Sam.
Yeah, different Sam. Sorry,
right.
SBF. Yeah, but this year there's something to be said to this year. What I like about the Consensus as well is things are more stripped down. People are more focused and serious. But these NFT loyalty programs and the ticket is so great because it will take years to develop and stuff. But this is the perfect year to introduce this. Like Sam has really hit the nail on the head. I think last year it would have been overwhelming, and I think this year, now that we have more loyalists coming and like I said, people that are more serious, it's the perfect year to introduce it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, I think it's interesting. I do think that NFT tickets will be one of the killer Web3 use cases.
I agree.
A few episodes ago on Web3 Deep Dive, we had JP, who's the CEO of TravelX. They're using the Algorand blockchain to do NFT plane tickets on Flybondi. CoinDesk covered the news.
Yeah.
So I'm sure you guys know about it. But he was just saying that, NFTs are being used for airline tickets on Flybondi. And it's amazing because you can buy a plane ticket like you do. You can just go to the website, buy the ticket. But then you're like, oh, I actually don't want to take this trip and I want to give the ticket to my sister. So you can.
It's amazing.
Now today you buy a ticket and you don't want to take the trip.
You're screwed.
It's like a disaster. You're screwed. I mean, it's then it's like, oh, do I get the money back or did they keep it or did I buy the right ticket to get a refund?
Yeah.
But with NFT tickets, there's so much that you can do that you can't do today. And that's why I think it's going to be the killer Web3 use case. And we're already seeing it implemented today in the real world with what you guys are doing at Consensus, with what TravelX is doing with Flybondi. And these are just the beginning use cases that are hopefully going to encourage mainstream adoption.
I agree. I mean, and no offense to there were a lot of very cool NFTs that came out last year, but it's just hard to take something like Crypto Dick Butt seriously as like these multi-million-dollar NFTs. And the technology is meant for something beyond just... No offense to the Crypto Dick Butt community, but
we know some crypto Dick Butt
I know a lot of, and they throw a great party, so I shouldn't say anything. But I mean, it's just, there's so much more importance beyond these JPEGs in the community. Like the technology is really strong and it's really innovative. So it has so much more importance than I think a lot of what I would call the NFT flux was last year. Like tickets are, I always thought were the best utility and use case for it.
Yeah.
It makes the most sense.
We also... I don't know if you've had Fonz on the show yet from Token Proof, who's based in Austin, by the way, so you probably should.
Good to know.
But, Token Proof, I think, has been a great... They figured out the technology better and earlier than most on redemption, which is a hard thing. Like, this isn't an easy problem to solve. But one of the things they did at NFT NYC last week, which I thought was really interesting, is with Adidas, who they have a deal with. People who came to the party... registered, they have the NFT, they get into the party, they then get to the event. Now you're in an Adidas store, right? They have performers, like you're feeling the vibe, and then suddenly you get the notification on Token Proof that because you hold the NFT, you now can get 25% off anything in the store, right? So they were doing like real-time contextual rewarding for people who happen to come to an event, which just to me, again, is like, how do you, just think about the psychographic of how much more you like the brand
Yeah.
when you get that gift that you weren't expecting, but because you happen to be a holder or you get access to a party, suddenly now you can overly reward, and then they're going to want to give you the money, right? Because they feel like, no, they get me, they respect me, and they invited me to the thing, I got in, and now I get to buy this thing with extra. So like things like that I think are really special. And then you think about what happens when, the 40 million people who are Starbucks loyalists and have the app, when they start to be able to get rewarded, or the way that Nike's doing, the way that Reddit is doing. 7 million people now have a Reddit NFT. Like the largest brand by far in Web3. No one really talks about it.
Yeah.
Partly because today you don't have utility, but what happens when Reddit does the deal with AMC movie theaters and suddenly everyone who has the avatar can get half price, movie tickets, and suddenly like, oh, this actually can become not only a singular loyalty program, but an interoperable loyalty program across various communities.
Yeah. And I mean, your point on with Adidas and how you have the NFT, you get 25% off in the store. That's such an obvious, easy way to redeem like your, the loyalty program. Amex, it's so hard to redeem your points. I mean, it's so hard to redeem like airline points. It's just not, it's almost psychological, and they make it so hard and difficult that it's
like health insurance.
Yeah, it's like health insurance.
Health insurance. Don't get me started.
Yeah, Amex has been around forever, and it just, I think people are sick of it. It's dysfunctional.
Right.
People want something that makes sense. If they're a loyal customer, then they want the rewards that they were promised.
Right. And they want to have that as ownership, which is, Casey, what you were talking about, the blockchain component, which is really important. I mean, that's why I got involved in this industry in the first place, was because of the technology. I just thought it was fascinating that blockchain allowed for so much.
But just to amp that up even further, it's like, what happened, we, at least in crypto, we can say, oh, you know what? You mentioned Algorand earlier. I like an Algorand project. Maybe there's an Algorand NFT. Great. I'm going to take a little bit of ETH and I'm going to go on Uniswap and I'm going to swap it for some algo and I can go buy a project. But like there is nowhere where I can swap my Delta points for Marriott points.
No, they would never let you do that.
That's true.
Right. There isn't really a marketplace yet that the opportunity in what we are doing is that you could do that. But not only that, what Marriott can't do or Amex can't do necessarily is be able to read that Casey happens to have this many points in her wallet. Doesn't have to know who Casey is, but just might say, oh, she's has a lot of Marriott points. What if we as Hilton could make an offer to try to win her over? Yeah. Why? Because we can look into the wallet and we can see that. So even just thinking about it, I'm a big fan of data and privacy, but I think that wallets are and should be transparent. And the opportunities to say, oh, you're interested in generative art, so maybe I should invite you to my film festival because it's probably a like-minded type of person. There starts to be a lot you can do around community. I want people who have, to look at the holders for our tickets and give them opportunities to go to Paris Blockchain Week.
Right.
Because they know that they're the same kind of people. So what happens if they say, if you hold a microcosm, we'll give you a 20% discount?
Right.
Right? Like, why not do those things? Because it's just a great way to identify people through their actual behaviors versus their hypothetical behaviors that most demographic study is.
Right. Yeah. No, the interoperability and just like the community aspect and openness of blockchain is huge. And I think that's why, we're still in the experimental stages of Web3, but this is why people like the idea of Web3. And there's a lot of innovation happening. But the question is, and I want to get your feedback on this. So people like my parents, for instance, they're older and they hear the word NFT and they get frightened, or they think of SBF and the FTX collapse because everybody knows about that. And they're like, oh, NFTs, we don't want to touch that. Or, oh, I don't know how to even, get an NFT into my wallet. So the question is this. Here we are talking about all the amazing benefits of NFTs and we're all happy. But how can we drive adoption of NFTs? Like, how can people understand that they're easy to use, that they're not bad most of the time?
That they're not going to get robbed, pretty much, or their computers are going to crash.
Yeah.
No, I get it. I mean, look, my mom used to work at the Whitney, and my dad is like, I'm sure they feel the same, but my mom, when NFTs first came around, she was just like scratching it. She's like, this is ridiculous. This isn't respecting art, but that's a separate conversation. But I think it's twofold. I mean, one, and I'm not just saying this because we're at a news organization, but it's just being very honest and transparent about what NFTs are, not pumping NFTs that have no utility behind them. I mean, just honest, transparent news, no more spreading misinformation about them, no more pumping and dumping them, similar to the ICO boom. But I think it's the major corporations coming in, like if Starbucks, the Reddit NFT, I think and just across Web3, more and more companies, that's why the companies that Sam mentioned are at Consensus, is that they are embracing and moving forward with Web3. And I think a big part of those companies, they do have an NFT component. I think most of them. But when you hear of a company that you're super familiar with and a brand you already trust, whether it's Nike or Amazon or whatever, and they offer an NFT, I mean, that's mainstream. That's mainstream adoption. Not to take it out of the hands of people in crypto, but those are mainstream companies. So
I mean, I guess the way I look at it is, I would ask your parents, are they watching Netflix? I would ask them, are they streaming any music? Are they doing things that if you had told them 20 years ago they would do, they would have said, there's no way that's even possible. And I think that's where we have to get them, which is that these are just, again, they're technology layers, they're infrastructure based. But the idea of, let's just say your parents were at a country club and paid to be at a country club, they are paying in and they're getting no real value out. The value out they're getting is access. Right?
Golf lessons and tennis lessons.
They are, but
Come on, Sam, I'm from Connecticut.
But they're paying for all of it, right? But what if you said that that country club has 10,000 members only, and so for someone to come in, someone has to go out. Then suddenly it makes they feel good because suddenly, there's a value, there's a status, there's something there. And what if they say, oh, you know what? My daughter wants in. I'm getting too old to play golf. I'm just going to send it to her wallet, so now she can, and then they don't have to worry about the approval layers of going through all that, the gatekeepers of the people who sort of are very good at keeping people out as much as they want to keep people in.
Right.
And so I think part of it is educating them that digital assets have value in the same way that many years ago, people ascribed that other forms of art or commerce didn't have value, right? I was reading about the first photography exhibit that happened in the States was, I think, 1973. And I think it was at the MoMA, and the critics bashed it. And they bashed it because photography wasn't considered art. Now you can go to exhibits and you're seeing photography all the time, right? It took a while for us to feel comfortable with that. So I think the idea of, will digital assets have value in their lives? Probably. Will that identity and opportunity to be secure need to happen educationally? Yes. And so we shouldn't be comfortable that our society wants us to make things as simple as possible, because things that have value should be hard.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the tweaks that we have to get away from. I remember this moment, and this was such an interesting unlock for me, where I went into Chase Bank. I bank with Chase, in case anyone wants to know.
It's good to know.
Yeah. So, and I'll say this out loud. I went to Chase Bank, and I used to have a PIN code that was 8 digits long, and I put my card in, and it said, you have to change your PIN code. And then when I tried to, it said it has to be 4 digits long, right? And I took my card out, I went to the teller, and I was like, I want to understand something. I said, it's asking me to change, it won't let me change it to something hard. It wants to be four digits. I said, why? And they said, well, because we took the feedback from our customers and they wanted easier to remember PIN codes. Now, there are people who have 7, 8 figures of value in the bank. Do you want to rely that on the person who is going to put 4321 because they can't remember something different? And that's where I was just shocked. I was like, no, I'm the kind of person who wants to have a 20 character PIN code because I value what's in the bank and I don't want anyone to get it. Right. So some of what we have to do as a society is saying that protecting our identity, protecting our digital assets, protecting the assets in our lives comes with a little bit of learning and education. And I think it's important for us to be comfortable with that, and that everything doesn't have to be reduced to the easiest thing. So I think your parents are probably right to be skeptical. Some people argue that blockchain will become invisible and therefore they'll be using the chain, they just won't know it. Some people say, no, we should let them know it's on Web3. Regardless, I think in the end, we're going to come to some happy medium where people are going to say, oh, you know what? That thing that I spent a lot of time to earn and to get should have a little bit of protection, and might mean I have to learn something new in order to do it. Or I have a device on my phone, on my ledger, on my whatever it is that I put next to it, and it verifies it's me. But it's where I just think like we don't need to talk about MP3s anymore. We don't need to talk about HTTP anymore. People get used to the technologies because it adds function to their lives. Mm-hmm. We have to get our parents. Luckily, our kids don't worry about that, right? Like they're already in native worlds where they're valuing digital assets, but our parents, I think, still have a really hard time saying that this Tyler Hobbs thing that costs $150,000, right, or this Ansel Adams photograph that costs $150,000 are equivalent to a collector's eye. They get freaked out because they can't see the photo printed out.
Yeah.
You can print out the Tyler Hobbs if you want. But the reality is a lot of people are getting more and more comfortable with digital assets having value. It may not be your parents' generation that are the ones we have to convince, because they probably can live a pretty happy life without doing it. Mm-hmm. If they want to get in on chain, we'll happily take them. But I think maybe the question is not about whether it's for them, but how do we get to the people we want to come in? Maybe that's actually looking younger versus older.
Well, that's like back to your parents use Facebook, right?
Yes.
It was impossible to get our parents on Facebook, and now I can't get mine off. I'm like, Dad, stop sharing all of our personal lives on your statuses. And but no, there really was a shift, with social media. And I do kind of foresee that with Web3 and NFTs specifically. There will be a time when they'll probably use what we will think of as an archaic form of it. But it will come around. I think it is inevitable, but I don't know when that will be.
Someone last week spent $500,000 on a Counter-Strike skin, right? So if you play video games,
you
play Counter-Strike. Here's a very rare skin that has a lot of powers that come with it. Someone spent $500,000 to buy that, which is purely a status play. How different is that than driving a Lamborghini?
Right.
Yeah, right. But I do think there's two different components with mainstream adoption, people using it, and that's the difference between people using NFTs as a utility and people purchasing NFTs for the value. And I do think that the older generation, unless they're very with it, I don't think that they will be perceiving the Ansel Adams photograph and a Tyler Hobbs or at the same level. But I do think that, like I said, back to the major corporations adopting and using NFTs, whether it's tickets or another form, I think that's kind of where I see the older generation, people that are less technologically savvy, using it, and they might not even know that they're using it.
Right. Well, that's what I was talking about with JP of TravelX, because you can go on the Flybondi website and it looks just like the website, right? And you purchase the ticket, and you can either pay in fiat with US dollars or the Argentinian peso, or you could pay in cryptocurrency, and now you have an NFT ticket. Mm-hmm. And it has that utility to it that you don't get with other airline tickets, but it's that easy to buy. And I think that's the thing that we need to stress in order to get mainstream adoption and to get people of the older generation on board, is that it's so easy. Just go on the Flybondi website, buy a ticket. It's an NF ticket, whether you know it or not. And now you have all of these things that you can do.
This is less of a headache for you in the long run, I promise.
Right. It doesn't have to be complicated. And I think that unfortunately, because it's still an early technology, there is complexity associated with it, especially given the fact that, we've transitioned. We've seen these NFT JPEGs that have sold for all of, millions of dollars, to now we're seeing NFT plane tickets. People are probably just confused.
They're super confused.
They're like, what is going on?
Well, there's a big difference between opening your OpenSea app, showing your parents that these are NFTs, and then showing them the airplane ticket that you bought that's also an NFT. That is confusing. It's confusing. One is you're using it as a utility to buy a ticket. Another is artwork, but it's hard for them to discern that. And crypto, aside from NFTs, crypto has always kind of had that duplicity where people were, with ICOs, that was one thing, but people forget that Bitcoin is not just a store of value. Ethereum, you can be used for payments. You can buy apartments, multi-million-dollar apartments in Miami with
Miami.
ease with crypto. But I think people, they forget that crypto is not just a store of value. It is a form of payment, and same with NFTs. NFTs are a form, they have a transactional purpose. They have an artistic purpose, but it's twofold. And I think that's what people need to remember, is that they don't necessarily, they are intertwined, but they can be separated.
Mm-hmm. So Casey, just going back real quick, I want to ask you, this is kind of like a side comment because you were talking about social media and Facebook, and then it made me think about Twitter and what we're seeing and what we're seeing today with Twitter. My blue check mark is gone, and I'm still debating, do I pay for a blue check mark or do I not pay for a blue check mark?
Oh God.
Alex, the producer, he's nodding his thumbs down. But anyways, social media.
Yeah.
So Bluesky. Is that what it's called? What is Bluesky? Do you guys know?
No,
I wasn't invited to try it.
I'm on it, but
You are? Okay, Sam,
yes.
what is it? I haven't been invited. I don't know how
It's
you
like
get
being a
invited.
super follower?
No. Most people gave out all their invite codes. So there's another wave coming, though. Bluesky is Jack Dorsey's new decentralized social network.
Okay.
And there's a couple of different, there's Nostr, there's a couple of other ones, Farcaster, which is now Warpcast. There's a fair amount of these decentralized platforms. I would say Bluesky has been getting some energy recently.
Yeah.
And I think partly because they, smartly did this sort of invite only, but only the current, invitees get to invite others. Mm-hmm. So you create these kind of the scarcity model, right? And people always want to get into things they can't get into. And it feels and looks like Twitter.
Yeah, it looks like Twitter.
I mean, the interesting thing is the people on it right now are artists and interesting folks in crypto and then people from, other places. So it feels a lot more curated. It feels more inside. Someone who I knew recently said it kind of felt like the early days of Clubhouse.
Okay.
Because Clubhouse also was invite only when you first got in.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
And so, I think people are pretty down on Twitter, and I think they have a lot of right to be down on Twitter. I think there's still a big difference between 25,000 people on Bluesky and 200 million on Twitter to see whether or not they're truly going to take down what this is. I think what it's showing me more than ever is that social media is more vulnerable. And there's an article in the Times this past week about that a lot of people are thinking that people are going towards micro communities. So the idea that, you need to have 1 million followers somewhere that matters, it doesn't matter to people as much. And frankly, like Elon kind of,
Because you can buy them.
well, that, and like Elon made it a lot less fun and cool to be on, in the same way that Mark Zuckerberg made it less interesting and cool to be on Instagram. Like, but if you can find 500, 5,000, 25,000 people who all are kind of share some similar sentiments and you all have one social place to all hang out, I think it's gonna be something.
Yeah.
Being on Bluesky, I will say it's not materially different, except there's a lot less people there.
Okay.
And no ads.
Yeah, because it looks like Twitter, in case you were talking about Facebook, and then I was thinking about Twitter and how people might start going to Bluesky because it looks very much like Twitter.
Yeah.
So I was curious to know about that.
What they do, which is interesting, is I joined about a little over a week ago. Someone had an invite for me. I think it takes 2 weeks to unlock your invites. So I think there's a lot of people who over the last week or two have been excited about it, who in the next week or two are going to be getting their invites unlocked. And I think they give you 20 or something like that. So we'll get you guys one. But
if anybody wants to send me an invite.
but I do think it's like interesting because I think if they keep that model up, it's like every 2 weeks, suddenly this exponentially larger wave of people come in who then start to learn the system and then start getting excited to be, who can I invite next? And it's just great. It's like great marketing, right?
Yeah,
it's the way to do it.
I hate Twitter. It's like the bane of my existence. I can't stand it, to be honest with you. I've never liked it. I just think like I said, we're news. The spread of misinformation on Twitter is awful. Like, there's anytime that there's a rumor, it spreads like wildfire on Twitter. I guess that's kind of what it would be like in the real world in a small office, but it explodes. But most of it is inaccurate. It drives me crazy. And I think that's the biggest problem, where people assume that crypto is shady or scammy, or they feel frustrated because they just want to know what's going on. I think Twitter is a big part of that problem. And I think when Elon came in, and now that's awful that you lost your blue check mark, because the journalists are the only ones on Twitter that should have a blue check mark. And that's where, if you hear a crypto rumor and you tweet it from an article that you wrote, or CoinDesk or the Wall Street Journal, that is what Twitter should be used for. That, and people have a lot of opinions, I understand that, but the way that people consume news these days is like in the smallest headlines. I mean, people's news span, you get them for 2 seconds, 3 seconds. So I hate to say this, a lot of people were getting their news through Twitter, whether it was through their alerts, whether they were following mainstream publications or not. So if the people that have a voice that should be trusted don't have their verification anymore, it defeats like one of the biggest positive purposes of Twitter.
Yeah. Well, thanks for saying that, Casey. I agree. And I have a lot of imposters on social media.
That happens to me too, but on Instagram, it's so weird.
Instagram, I actually paid for the Instagram check mark because
I needed to cut it out.
Yeah, I
it
needed
was too
to.
weird.
And I couldn't actually get one without paying for it because I didn't have enough articles written on me. I wasn't, a celebrity, so I didn't get the blue check mark. I had to pay for it. But anyways, I could talk to both of you for hours. Seriously, this has been a great conversation. We're going to wrap things up because obviously you guys have a conference to put on.
Yes.
So any final thoughts before we end the interview? Maybe Casey, was there something you wanted to add? And then Sam, I'll ask you.
No, just, thanks so much for having us. And I hope, everyone, I know this is coming out next week, but everyone has a good time at Consensus. Yeah, and I'm just, this is our 9th year, so I'm really glad to, that it's number 9 for us. And congrats, Sam, on the first year of our NFT on my person.
Thank you. Yeah. No, just thanks for having us. It's we're always happy to be in Texas. We love that this is in Texas.
Yeah, Austin's cool. I like it here.
Great town, and love what you guys have been doing. So happy to be here.
Cool. Well, thanks, guys. Thanks for coming on Web3 Deep Dive.
Of course. Thanks, Rachel.
Thanks, Rachel.